The morning sun broke through the thick clouds that perpetually hung over what remained of the world, casting long shadows across the steel walls of Haven's Rest. Marcus Rivera stood atop the eastern watchtower, his weathered hands gripping the cold railing as his dark eyes surveyed the wasteland beyond. 15 years had passed since the Great War ended, 15 years since humanity claimed a fragile victory against the undead hordes that had nearly wiped them from existence. The war had officially concluded with the establishment of the Dead Zones, vast quarantine territories where the remaining zombies wandered aimlessly, separated from human settlements by massive walls and constant vigilance. Haven's Rest was one of the last bastions of civilization, home to nearly 3,000 survivors who had learned to cultivate crops in contaminated soil, purify poisoned water, and live with the constant fear that the peace they had fought so hard to achieve could shatter at any moment. Marcus had helped build this place from nothing, transforming an abandoned military compound into a thriving community where children who had never known the old world could grow up with something resembling hope. Behind him, the settlement buzzed with morning activity as farmers headed to the greenhouses, guards changed shifts along the perimeter, and merchants opened their stalls in the central marketplace. His daughter Emma, now 23 years old with her mother's fierce determination and his own stubborn resilience, was already at the training grounds, leading a group of younger recruits through combat drills. She had been only 8 when the war ended, and Marcus often wondered if she truly understood how much had been sacrificed to give her this life. Dr. Helen Wright, the settlement's chief scientist and medical officer, emerged from her laboratory with the same exhausted expression she wore most days, her graying hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail as she carried another set of soil samples for testing. The land was slowly healing, she had told the council last month, but it would take generations before it resembled anything like the world that had been lost. Jake Morrison, captain of the guard and Marcus's closest friend since the dark days of the war, approached the watchtower with unusual urgency in his stride, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip in a way that immediately put Marcus on alert. "We've got a situation at the south gate," Jake called up, his voice tight with tension. "A survivor just collapsed outside. He's in bad shape, but he's saying things you need to hear." Marcus descended the watchtower ladder quickly, his military training from another lifetime taking over as he followed Jake through the winding streets of Haven's Rest. The south gate was the most fortified entrance, positioned farthest from the dead zones and typically used for trade with the few other settlements that remained in contact. A small crowd had gathered, kept back by armed guards as Dr. Wright knelt beside a man who looked like he had crawled through hell itself. His clothes were shredded, his exposed skin covered in cuts and bruises, and his eyes held the distinctive hollow look of someone who had seen something that shattered their understanding of the world. "His name is Tyler Brooks," Dr. Wright reported as Marcus approached, her hands already working to treat the man's wounds. "He claims he's from Redemption Falls, but Marcus, that's over 200 miles east, deep in the buffer zone between us and the dead zones." Tyler's hand suddenly shot out, gripping Marcus's sleeve with desperate strength. "They're coming," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "Redemption Falls is gone. Everyone's dead or worse. But they weren't like the others, the ones from the war. These were different. They were organized, coordinated. They had a leader." The words sent a chill down Marcus's spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. The zombies from the Great War had been mindless, driven by base hunger and primitive instinct. That's how humanity had eventually won, by outlasting and outsmarting creatures that couldn't plan or adapt. "That's impossible," Jake said what everyone was thinking. "The undead don't organize. They can't." Tyler's laugh was bitter and broken. "That's what we thought too, right until they breached our walls in a coordinated three-point attack. Right until we saw him, standing on the ridge, directing them like a general commanding troops." His eyes locked onto Marcus with terrifying intensity. "The war never ended. We just stopped paying attention." The emergency council meeting convened within the hour in the old command center, a reinforced concrete building at the heart of Haven's Rest that had survived countless attacks during the war's darkest days. Marcus sat at the worn wooden table alongside the other council members, his mind racing as he processed Tyler's impossible claims. Jake stood guard by the door, his usual relaxed demeanor replaced by rigid military alertness, while Dr. Wright tended to Tyler in the medical bay below, pumping him full of antibiotics and fluids to keep him alive long enough to provide more answers. Catherine Walsh, the settlement's agricultural director and a sharp-minded woman in her 50s who had once been a logistics commander during the war, was the first to break the heavy silence. "If what this Tyler Brooks says is true, we're looking at a threat we're completely unprepared for," she stated, her fingers drumming against the table in a nervous rhythm. "Our defenses were designed to repel mindless hordes, not tactical assaults." Across from her, Robert Kane, the settlement's oldest council member and unofficial historian, shook his head slowly, his lined face skeptical. "In all my years studying the undead, documenting their behavior, their patterns, I've never seen evidence of genuine intelligence beyond basic problem solving. This survivor is traumatized, probably delirious from his journey. Redemption Falls might have fallen to a regular horde, and his mind filled in the gaps with impossible explanations." Marcus wanted to believe Robert, wanted to dismiss Tyler's story as the ravings of a broken man, but something in those desperate eyes had convinced him otherwise. "We need to send a reconnaissance team," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the debate that had erupted around the table. "We verify his story, see what actually happened to Redemption Falls, and gather intelligence on whatever threat is out there." The room erupted in protest, with council member after council member citing the risks, the resources it would waste, the panic it might cause among the settlement's population. Patricia Hernandez, who oversaw Haven's Rest education and civilian welfare, leaned forward with concern etched across her features. "Marcus, if we send our best fighters on a mission based on questionable intelligence, we leave the settlement vulnerable. We have children here, families who depend on us to make rational decisions, not chase shadows in the wasteland." Her words stung because they carried truth, but Marcus had survived the Great War by trusting his instincts, and every fiber of his being screamed that Tyler's warning was genuine. Dr. Wright entered the council chamber at that moment, her expression grave as she carried a tablet displaying medical scans and notes. "I need to show you something," she announced, connecting the tablet to the main display screen. Images of Tyler's blood work appeared, magnified and analyzed in detail that made several council members lean forward with sudden interest. "Tyler has trace amounts of the necrovirus in his system, but it's different from any strain we encountered during the war. The viral markers have been modified, almost engineered, and there's something else, evidence of a neural toxin we've never seen before." She pulled up comparison charts showing the original virus strains from 15 years ago alongside these new findings. Whatever attacked Redemption Falls, it wasn't ordinary undead. This virus has evolved or worse, been deliberately altered. The implications hit the council like a physical blow, and Marcus watched as skepticism transformed into fear across their faces. If the undead had somehow evolved intelligence, if they had developed the capacity to modify their own infectious agent, then the peace humanity had fought for was built on a foundation of ignorance. Jake spoke up from his position by the door, his tactical mind already working through scenarios. "I'll lead the reconnaissance team. Take 4 of our best scouts, travel light and fast, get to Redemption Falls and return within a week. We can't ignore this, but we don't have to be reckless about it either." Marcus nodded gratefully at his friend's support, but before he could speak, the alarm bells began ringing throughout Haven's Rest, their urgent clanging sending everyone to their feet. A young guard burst through the door, his face pale with terror. "The northern sensors just detected movement," he gasped. "Multiple signatures, at least 50 strong, approaching in formation. Sir, they're not wandering randomly. They're marching like soldiers and they're headed straight for us." The war, it seemed, had found them first. Marcus sprinted toward the northern wall alongside Jake and a dozen armed guards, his heart pounding as the settlement erupted into controlled chaos behind them. Years of emergency drills kicked in automatically as civilians rushed to designated safe zones, parents carrying children toward the reinforced shelters while defensive teams took their positions along the perimeter. Emma was already on the wall when Marcus arrived, her rifle raised and her jaw set with determination as she peered through a high-powered scope at the approaching threat. "Dad, you need to see this," she said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating through her body. Marcus took the scope and felt his blood run cold at what he witnessed. 53 undead, he counted quickly, but these weren't the shambling corpses he remembered from the war. They moved with purpose and coordination, their formation tight and deliberate as they crossed the wasteland in organized ranks. At the front walked a figure that made Marcus's hands tighten on the scope until his knuckles went white. The creature stood taller than the others, its body less decayed, almost preserved, and it wore the tattered remains of what had once been a military officer's uniform. But it was the eyes that truly terrified him. They weren't the milky white orbs of mindless undead but dark and aware, filled with an intelligence that should not exist. Jake had his own binoculars trained on the approaching force, his combat experience evident in how quickly he assessed the tactical situation. They're staying out of rifle range, testing our response. The smaller groups are flanking left and right, probing for weak points in our defenses. Marcus, this is a coordinated assault pattern, exactly like what we'd use against a fortified position. The implications were staggering, and Marcus forced himself to think past his fear and focus on protecting his people. Get the heavy weapons teams to the wall, he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded troops through countless battles. I want sharpshooters on every tower and tell the flame unit to stand ready. Whatever these things are, we burn them before they reach the gates. The guards scrambled to execute his commands as more defenders joined them on the wall, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and determination that Marcus felt in his own chest. Below in the settlement, Dr. Wright was organizing the medical teams while Catherine Walsh ensured the food stores and water supplies were secured in case of a prolonged siege. The zombie formation stopped approximately 300 yards from the wall, far enough to avoid accurate rifle fire but close enough to send a clear message. The leader, the tall figure in the military uniform, stepped forward alone, and when it opened its mouth, a sound emerged that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. Humans of Haven's Rest, the creature spoke, its voice rough and distorted but unmistakably intelligent and articulate. I am Commander Vance and I have come to offer terms. The wall erupted in shocked exclamations and frightened whispers as defenders struggled to process what they were hearing. Emma lowered her rifle slightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. That's impossible. They can't talk. They've never been able to talk. Jake's face had gone pale, and Marcus knew his friend was remembering the same thing he was. Every strategic assumption they had made about the undead, every defensive plan, every reason they had believed humanity could survive, all of it was based on the enemy being mindless and predictable. Marcus stepped forward to the edge of the wall, forcing his voice to remain strong and clear. This settlement doesn't negotiate with the undead. Leave now or we will destroy you. Commander Vance's response was a sound that might have been laughter, dry and crackling like dead leaves. You misunderstand your position. Redemption Falls refused to listen as well. Silver Creek before that. Harmony Station before that. We have been reclaiming territory, settlement by settlement, and you cannot stop what is already in motion. The creature raised one decayed hand, and the zombie formation behind it suddenly shifted, parting down the middle to reveal something being dragged forward. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he recognized the battered survivors, 5 people in Redemption Falls clothing, bitten but not yet turned, their terrified faces pleading silently for help. You have until dawn tomorrow to evacuate, Vance continued, his dead eyes fixed on Marcus with unnerving focus. Leave peacefully and you will be allowed to flee. Resist and you will join our ranks. The choice for now remains yours. With that, the zombie formation began a perfect military withdrawal, dragging the doomed survivors back into the wasteland while Haven's Rest watched in horror, their world forever changed. The council chamber felt smaller than before as Marcus faced the reality that their safe haven had become a death trap in the span of hours. The entire leadership of Haven's Rest had assembled, joined now by Tyler Brooks, who sat propped up with bandages and intravenous lines still attached to his arm, his presence a grim testament to the truth they had all just witnessed. The room buzzed with heated arguments as council members debated their options, voices rising in panic and desperation. Robert Kane insisted they had no choice but to evacuate, to pack what they could carry and flee west toward the rumored settlements near the old coast. Patricia Hernandez supported him, her maternal instincts focused on protecting the children and elderly who would suffer most in any battle. Catherine Walsh argued the opposite, pointing out that they had nowhere to go, no guarantee that any other settlement still existed, and that running would mean abandoning everything they had built. Marcus listened to them all, his mind working through scenarios and outcomes, calculating odds that seemed to worsen with every passing minute. Jake stood beside him, silent and tense, occasionally glancing at the security monitors that showed their defenders maintaining watchful positions along the walls. Dr. Wright finally slammed her hand on the table, silencing the debate with uncharacteristic force. Everyone needs to hear what Tyler told me in the medical bay, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. Tell them what you told me about how Redemption Falls really fell. Tyler took a shaky breath, his haunted eyes moving across the faces staring at him with desperate hope for answers. Commander Vance didn't just attack us. He studied us first for weeks, maybe months. We found evidence afterward, observation posts in the ruins outside our walls, logs written in blood documenting our patrol patterns, our shift changes, our weaknesses. They watched us like scientists studying insects. He paused, swallowing hard against the memory. When they finally attacked, it wasn't just the zombies we could see. Vance had sent infected in disguise, ones who looked almost human, who still had enough cognitive function to blend in. They sabotaged our generators, unlocked gates from the inside, and created chaos while the main force breached our defenses. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. The implications sent a wave of paranoia through the council, and Marcus saw the same thought occurring to everyone simultaneously. If Vance could plant infiltrators, if some infected could pass as human, then anyone in Haven's Rest could be compromised. Emma entered the chamber at that moment, her face flushed from running. The perimeter sweep just found something at the eastern sector. You all need to see this now. They followed her through the settlement to a storage building near the outer wall, where guards had cordoned off an area and were standing watch over a gruesome discovery. Lying on the concrete floor were the bodies of 2 guards who had been on patrol the previous night, their throats cut, their bodies hidden behind supply crates. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the map spread between them, hand-drawn but detailed, showing Haven's Rest complete layout including defensive positions, weapons stores and the locations of the civilian shelters. We found this next to them, Emma said, holding up a small recorder. She pressed play and Commander Vance's distorted voice filled the air. Your defenses are known to us. Your strength is measured. Your time is counted. Resistance is merely postponing the inevitable. Jake immediately ordered a full lockdown and began organizing teams to sweep every building, every corner of the settlement for more evidence of infiltration. Dr. Wright pulled Marcus aside, her expression a mixture of fear and scientific excitement. I've been analyzing the virus samples from Tyler's blood, and I think I understand what Vance is. The necrovirus doesn't just reanimate dead tissue. In rare cases, if the host is infected while still alive and their brain remains relatively intact, the virus acts differently. It preserves cognitive function while eliminating pain, fear, and human empathy. Vance isn't just an intelligent zombie, he's something new, a hybrid that retains military knowledge and strategic thinking but serves the virus's imperative to spread and consume. Marcus absorbed this information, understanding that they were facing an enemy that combined the relentlessness of the undead with human cunning. Can we fight something like that? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Dr. Wright met his gaze steadily. I don't know, but I do know that running won't save us. If Vance has been systematically destroying settlements, he'll just hunt us down. Our only chance is to find a weakness, something he doesn't expect. Marcus made his decision then, the weight of 3,000 lives resting on his shoulders. He returned to the council chamber and stood before the assembled leaders with quiet determination. We're not evacuating and we're not surrendering. Haven's Rest has survived too much to fall without a fight. But we're also not going to wait for Vance to attack on his terms. He looked around the room, seeing fear transform into resolve on familiar faces. We're going to do what he won't expect. We're going to take the fight to him, hit his forces before dawn, disrupt his plans and show him that humanity didn't survive the Great War by giving up when things got difficult. Jake, gather our best fighters. Dr. Wright, I need anything you can develop that might work against these things. Catherine, prepare the settlement for siege conditions just in case. We have one night to prepare for a battle that will determine whether Haven's Rest sees another dawn. The council members nodded, their fear still present but now tempered with purpose, and as they dispersed to their tasks, Marcus caught Emma's eye and saw pride mixed with worry in her expression, the look of someone who understood that sometimes the only way forward was through the fire. The night descended upon Haven's Rest like a heavy blanket, but instead of rest, the settlement hummed with frantic preparation for a battle that would determine their survival. Marcus stood in the armory watching Jake distribute weapons to the strike team, 25 of their best fighters, each one a veteran of the Great War who understood that this mission was likely a one-way journey. Emma had insisted on joining the team despite Marcus's protests, and he had eventually relented, knowing that his daughter had earned her place among Haven's Rest elite defenders through years of training and dedication. Across the room, Tommy Chin, their explosives expert, was rigging improvised charges while muttering calculations under his breath, his fingers working with practiced precision. Beside him, Rachel Foster, a former Army Ranger who had lost her entire family to the undead, methodically checked her sniper rifle, her face an emotionless mask that Marcus recognized as the calm before extreme violence. The team also included Derek Walsh, Catherine's nephew and their best tracker, along with Maria Santos, a quiet woman in her 30s whose skill with blades had saved countless lives during the war's final days. Dr. Wright arrived carrying a case filled with syringes containing a serum she had developed in the past few hours, her exhausted face betraying the impossible pressure she had been working under. "It's not much, but I've concentrated a compound that might slow down the enhanced undead," she explained, distributing the syringes to each team member. "The theory is that it will interfere with the virus's control over motor functions, essentially paralyzing them temporarily. I haven't had time to test it properly, so consider it a last resort." Marcus took his syringe, noting the slight tremor in Helen's hands that revealed her fear for all of them. "You've always come through when we needed you," he told her quietly. "Whatever happens tonight, Haven's Rest has a fighting chance because of your work." She nodded, blinking back tears before quickly composing herself and moving to check each team member's equipment with clinical efficiency. Jake approached with the tactical plan they had developed, spreading a map across the workbench showing the terrain between Haven's Rest and where Vance's forces had withdrawn. "Intelligence from our scouts indicates Vance has established a staging area in the ruins of the old factory complex, about 5 miles northeast," Jake explained, his finger tracing their planned route. "They're not trying to hide, which means either they're overconfident or it's a trap. Probably both." The plan was aggressive and desperate: infiltrate under cover of darkness, use Tommy's explosives to create chaos and confusion, eliminate as many enhanced undead as possible, and if the opportunity presented itself, take down Commander Vance himself. Marcus knew the odds were terrible, that they might all die in the wasteland while Haven's Rest remained vulnerable, but doing nothing guaranteed destruction. "We move in 30 minutes, he announced to the assembled team. "Stay tight, watch each other's backs, and remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. Every person in this settlement, every child who deserves to grow up free from this nightmare, they're all depending on us to buy them time or end this threat permanently." The fighters nodded grimly, checking their gear one final time as the weight of their mission settled over them. Emma approached her father as the team began moving toward the north gate, her expression softer than the warrior facade she usually wore. "Mom would have told you this was crazy," she said quietly. She also would have been the first one out that gate. Marcus felt the familiar ache of loss for his wife, who had died during the war's final year, and pulled his daughter into a brief embrace. "Your mother would be proud of the person you've become." "I know I am." They separated quickly, both uncomfortable with emotional displays before a mission, and joined the rest of the strike team as the gates opened just wide enough to let them slip into the darkness beyond. The wasteland stretched before them, illuminated only by pale moonlight that cast everything in shades of gray and shadow. Tyler Brooks watched them go from the medical bay window, his face haunted by the knowledge of what they were walking into, while back in the command center, Dr. Wright monitored communication frequencies and prayed to God she had stopped believing in during the war that some of them would return. The team moved in tactical formation through the dead landscape, their footsteps silent on ground where nothing had grown for over a decade. Derek led the way, his eyes scanning for threats while his hands signaled warnings about unstable terrain and potential ambush points. They covered the first 2 miles without incident, but Marcus felt the weight of unseen eyes watching their progress, and he knew that Vance was aware of their approach. The factory complex emerged from the darkness like a skeletal monument to the world that had died, its broken windows and collapsed walls creating a maze of shadows and danger. Through his night vision scope, Marcus could see the undead, dozens of them, positioned with military precision around the perimeter. "They're expecting us," Rachel whispered from her position beside him, confirming what they all suspected. Jake's face was grim as he surveyed their target. "Then we give them a show they won't forget. Tommy, set your charges. Everyone else, on my signal, we light up this whole place and remind these dead bastards why humanity won the first war." The team spread out into their assigned positions, and Marcus felt the familiar pre-battle surge of adrenaline mixed with terror, knowing that in moments, the fragile peace of 15 years would shatter completely, and the true test of Haven's Rest survival would begin in fire and blood. Tommy's first explosion shattered the night silence, a brilliant flash of orange flame that tore through the factory's eastern wall and sent undead bodies tumbling through the air like broken dolls. The strike team moved immediately, their weapons firing in coordinated bursts as they pushed forward through the breach, using the chaos and confusion exactly as planned. Marcus led his squad through billowing smoke and debris, his rifle bucking against his shoulder as he dropped 3 zombies that rushed toward them with unnerving speed and coordination. Emma moved beside him with fluid precision, her shots finding targets with the accuracy he had drilled into her since childhood, while Jake's voice crackled over the radio coordinating their advance with the cold efficiency of a man who had fought 100 battles. The enhanced undead fought back with terrifying effectiveness, using cover and tactical retreats instead of the mindless charges they had expected, and within the first minute Marcus realized they had underestimated just how much warfare had changed. Derek went down first, a zombie in tattered police uniform tackling him from a blind spot, and only Maria's quick intervention with her machete saved him from being bitten, though his leg was badly broken in the struggle. Rachel had positioned herself in an elevated sniper's nest among the factory ruins, her scope tracking targets as she provided covering fire for the advancing team. "I count at least 70 hostiles, more than we anticipated." Her voice came through the communications, steady despite the overwhelming odds. "They're falling back toward the central building in organized sections, and Vance is directing them from the upper level." Marcus glimpsed the commander through a shattered window, standing motionless as his forces maneuvered around the human attack, and the sight filled him with cold dread. Tommy set 2 more charges, collapsing a section of wall that crushed a group of zombies and opened a path deeper into the complex, but the victory was short-lived as return fire came from unexpected directions. "They have guns," Jake shouted in disbelief as bullets sparked off metal beams around them. "Some of them still have enough motor control to use weapons." The implications were staggering, and the tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as the strike team found themselves pinned down by undead that could shoot back, something no survival manual or war doctrine had prepared them for. Emma and Maria pushed forward through a side corridor, clearing rooms with brutal efficiency until they found something that stopped them cold. A laboratory had been set up in the factory's old administrative section, filled with makeshift equipment and tables covered in documents. Emma's flashlight revealed walls covered in maps showing every human settlement within 500 miles, each one marked with dates and notations in dried blood. "Dad, you need to see this," she radioed, her voice shaking slightly. "Vance hasn't just been attacking randomly. This is a systematic campaign. He's been planning this for years." Marcus fought his way to her position, his eyes scanning the intelligence that revealed the true scope of their enemy's vision. Redemption Falls, Silver Creek, Harmony Station, all marked as reclaimed, with precise dates. Haven's Rest was circled in fresh blood with tomorrow's date written beside it, but what truly terrified Marcus was the document titled Phase 2, that detailed plans for converting human settlements into breeding grounds for enhanced undead, creating an army that could think, plan, and eventually overwhelm the last remnants of humanity through superior strategy rather than mere numbers. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps echoed through the corridor, and Commander Vance emerged from the shadows, his preserved features twisted into something approximating a smile. "You fight well, Marcus Rivera," the creature spoke, his dead eyes gleaming with intelligence. "Better than the others. But you're fighting for a world that's already gone, clinging to a species that evolution has left behind." Marcus raised his weapon, but Vance moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance and striking the rifle away before Marcus could fire. They grappled in close combat, and Marcus felt the horrifying strength in Vance's grip, far beyond what any human could possess. "I was like you once," Vance continued conversationally as he fought, his movements precise and controlled. "Colonel Richard Vance, United States Army. I died defending people who couldn't be saved, and when I woke up I finally understood the truth. The virus isn't a plague, it's transcendence." Emma opened fire, her bullets hitting Vance's shoulder and chest, but the creature barely flinched, his enhanced physiology ignoring damage that would have killed a human instantly. Jake arrived with reinforcements and the combined firepower finally forced Vance to retreat, but not before the commander delivered his final message. "You've seen the maps, Marcus. You know you can't win. But I'm offering you something the others didn't receive, a choice. Join us willingly, retain your intelligence and identity, and help guide humanity's transformation into something that can truly survive in this new world. Or die defending a failed species and watch everyone you love suffer the same fate." With that, Vance disappeared through a concealed exit as more explosions rocked the factory, Tommy's charges bringing down sections of the structure. "We need to leave now," Jake ordered as the building began collapsing around them. The strike team retreated in organized chaos, carrying their wounded and the intelligence they had discovered, and as they fled into the wasteland, Marcus looked back to see Vance standing in the ruins, watching them go with the patience of something that had all the time in the world, knowing that Haven's Rest faced not just an attack, but an ideology that could prove more dangerous than any horde. The strike team limped back through Haven's Rest gates just as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, their mission a costly success that had bought them knowledge but not safety. Marcus gathered the council immediately, spreading the captured intelligence across the table while Dr. Wright tended to Derek's broken leg and the various injuries the team had sustained. The maps and documents told a story more terrifying than anyone had imagined, revealing that Vance's campaign wasn't the work of months but years of patient planning, studying human settlements, identifying weaknesses, and systematically eliminating them one by one. We killed maybe 30 of his forces, wounded Vance himself, and destroyed his staging area, Jake reported grimly. But he has other bases, other forces, and now we've made this personal. The council members stared at the evidence before them, the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on everyone present. Robert Kane looked older than his years as he studied the Phase 2 documents, his hands trembling slightly. He's not just trying to destroy us. He wants to convert us to build an empire of intelligent undead. This isn't a war we can win through conventional means. Catherine Walsh straightened in her chair, her logistical mind already working through their options. Then we change the game entirely. We can't fight Vance's army head-on, but we can do what humanity has always done best: we adapt, we survive, and we find allies. She pointed to several settlements on the map that weren't marked as destroyed. These communities might not even know their targets yet. If we can warn them, coordinate our defenses, share Dr. Wright's research on the virus, we transform this from isolated settlements being picked off into a unified resistance. Marcus felt hope stirring for the first time since this nightmare began, recognizing the strategy that had won humanity the First Great War, not superior strength but superior cooperation and the stubborn refusal to accept extinction. Emma supported the plan immediately, volunteering to lead messenger teams to the nearest settlements, while Patricia Hernandez began organizing a communication network that could span the wasteland using old radio equipment they had salvaged over the years. Dr. Wright stood abruptly, her eyes bright with the manic energy of a breakthrough. I think I know how to stop Vance, not kill him necessarily but neutralize what makes him dangerous. The virus preserves his cognitive function by maintaining specific neural pathways, but it's a delicate balance. If we can develop an airborne agent that disrupts those pathways without being lethal to humans, we could reduce the enhanced undead back to their base state, mindless and manageable. She pulled out her research notes showing chemical formulas and test results. It would take time, resources, and cooperation from every settlement that has scientific capability, but it's theoretically possible. We could turn Vance's greatest weapon, his intelligence, into his vulnerability. The council erupted in excited discussion, and Marcus watched as despair transformed into determined purpose across every face. They had spent 15 years believing the war was over, growing complacent behind their walls, but Vance had inadvertently given them something precious, a reason to unite, to fight not just for survival but for the future they wanted to build. The alarm bells that had signaled Vance's first approach remained silent as dawn fully broke, golden light spilling across Haven's Rest and illuminating the settlement in warm tones that felt like a promise. Marcus stood once more on the eastern watchtower, but this time Emma stood beside him, along with Jake, Dr. Wright, and the other council members who had become his family through shared struggle. In the distance they could see smoke rising from the factory ruins, evidence of the battle they had survived. Vance will come again, Marcus said quietly, acknowledging the reality they all faced. He'll be angry, more prepared, and he won't underestimate us next time. But he made a critical mistake. He gave us time to prepare and he reminded us why we fight. Emma nodded, her hand briefly touching her father's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. The Great War never really ended, did it? We just stopped paying attention. But we're awake now and we won't make that mistake again. Below them, Haven's Rest came fully alive with morning activity, but now every action carried new purpose as people worked not just to maintain their settlement but to prepare for the larger struggle ahead. Runners were being equipped for journeys to distant communities, scientists were collaborating on Dr. Wright's antiviral agent, and defensive positions were being reinforced with lessons learned from the factory battle. Tyler Brooks, recovered enough to walk with assistance, joined the planning committees, his knowledge of Vance's tactics proving invaluable. Tommy was already sketching plans for new weapons and traps, while Rachel trained more sharpshooters in the techniques that had kept them alive during the counterattack. Marcus watched his people transform fear into action, and he understood that this was humanity's true strength, not the ability to win every battle, but the refusal to surrender even when victory seemed impossible. The Forgotten Dawn had arrived not as an ending but as a genuine new beginning, and as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Marcus Rivera allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the war between humans and the undead could finally be won, not through violence alone, but through the indomitable will to survive that had carried humanity through every dark age it had ever faced, emerging battered but unbroken into the light of another day. The end.